Welcome to another episode of Beyond Belief, Faith After Religious Deconstruction, where we explore authentic spiritual beliefs and faith without the boundaries of traditional religious beliefs. Today, my guest is Justin Tang. Justin is a certified hypnotist. He is also a religious trauma specialist, and I'm so glad that he has taken his time today to be with us. So, welcome to the show, Justin.
Thank you. I am honored to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, I would like for you to just tell us a little bit about yourself and how this journey to becoming a specialist for religious trauma came about.
Yeah, and as you might guess, that this is very personal to me. And so I've always been a very religious, actually, but a very spiritual seeker, you could
Mhm.
say. I've always been very interested in the deep questions. What is the meaning of life? Is there a God? What is the nature of reality and all this stuff? As much as a kid could be interested in that. So I've always kind of had that personality. And I've always also been very interested in people. And I wouldn't have put it that way as a kid, but I was so interested in like, why was I the way I was? And and I didn't understand other people either. And so if you combine that, I really had this intellectual curiosity, spiritual matters, and then I had this curiosity about myself and about other people. And you combine that, that might explain a little bit of how I ended up here. And so I'm sure we'll get into this, my story. But long story short, through my journey, I realized some very deep truths. One of them being that we don't know ourselves as much as we think we do. I don't know myself as much as I think I do. And in that journey, I discovered things like hypnosis, right? Mindfulness meditation, which I'm sure that some people listening here, when they hear hypnosis, when they hear, oh no, meditation, those things are evil, those are the devil. I can assure you that's not true. Take a breather. But these things really helped me to understand who I was. Not only just understand, but also uncover wounds, uncover layers, limiting beliefs. Of course, a lot of religious limiting beliefs, parts of me that were still holding on to past programming, past hurts, maybe resentment, maybe, grief, maybe fear, whatever it was. And through that, I was able to uncover more and more of who I was authentically and still hold on to my spirituality, which is interesting. So I'm sure we can get into this and uh, yeah, hopefully I answered that
Yes,
question
you did answer my
sufficiently.
question. You
Yeah,
did answer my question, but I do want to back up a little bit and
sure.
talk a little bit also about the faith that you come from, the faith of your childhood, because I know you deconstructed from that and now you have, a different, you've landed in a different place. So I do want us to walk through that a little bit.
Sure, absolutely. Do you want the long version or the short version?
You can give me any version.
I'll do any version. Yeah. Okay. Well, I grew up in Texas, and in Texas, I like to say that we love guns, we love steak, and we love Jesus. And if you're, in the area that I'm in, there's like three churches on every corner, right? It's just like a staple of the culture. Like it's just part of, yeah, it's just part of the area, right? So I grew up religious. I grew up in a non-denominational Asian church. So even though they were non-denominational, it was probably more like Baptist, right? But I
Mhm.
grew up singing all the songs, Jesus loves me, learning about Noah's Ark and Father Abraham, and I'm a warrior in God's kingdom, right? I'm a soldier, all this stuff, right? And that's the thing, like, a VBS, if you're familiar with Vacation
Yes.
Bible Study, yep, all of that. And that was my life. And growing up, I actually loved that type of thing, right? Because I was very interested in the deeper matters. And I would say that right around middle school was when I really started to take my faith much more seriously. And at this point, I've been to Billy Graham. I've been to a Billy Graham. altar call. I've done multiple altar calls. And in middle school, I did another altar call, right? Like, okay, I'm a sinner. I need to be saved by Jesus. I've done multiple of those things, right? But in middle school, I had a culture shock. So with Asian churches and Asian culture in general, it's much more conservative. It's a very honor shame culture. Um, and you have to save face. There's not a whole lot of emotionalism, right? And I'm sure you know.
I do. Very
Yes.
similar to
Yeah.
Indian culture.
Yes, yes. But in middle school, I stumbled, our parents, my parents, my family stumbled across a house church and we started to go to this house church. Now, despite them being Asian, it was also part of the charismatic movement. They were very highly charismatic. And for people who don't know, that is a movement within Christianity that emphasizes the sign gifts or the charismatic sign gifts being speaking in tongues, prophecy, dreams, supernatural healing, all this type of thing. So these are the gifts. And I was always taught that, oh, these things they've ceased for today. That's what I was taught growing up, right? Like, yes, God did it through Moses and the prophets, but that was in the Bible. But now today, that's ceased. Well, this was a culture shock because now I'm hearing people speak in tongues and they're talking about their dreams and their prophecies, and it was a lot more emotionalism and this is the first time ever experiencing this. And we started to go to this organization called IHOP, not pancakes, not International House of Pancakes. It's the International House of Prayer. And if you're kept up with them, they're now steeped in a lot of controversy. They're pretty much shut down because of abuse. And, anyways, but at the time, nobody knew that, right? And I certainly didn't. All I knew was these people are really just on fire for Jesus, and they're talking about the end times. A lot of talk about the end times. That Jesus is coming any moment now. We need to repent. We need to get right with God. We need to prepare for the coming of the bridegroom. And so this was all like in that culture, and I was getting like inundated with this, right? At the same time, I'm experiencing this culture shock, this charismatic stuff, and the third thing that really shifted my faith was at an IHOP conference. I picked up this bookmark, and it was a bookmark that said, "Not my job." And it was basically a tract for Christians to take evangelism seriously. And it was by Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron. I don't know if you're familiar with
I
their
am
ministry.
familiar with Kirk Cameron.
Kirk Cameron, yeah. So he was a big movie star back in the day, but he turned
Yes.
fundamentalist Christian, and he's been in some movies like Left Behind and things like that. But anyways, it was their ministry, and their whole ministry was that we need to warn people about hell,
Mm.
and because their most famous, oh, their tagline or their course or what they were known for is hell's best kept secret, and hell's best kept secret is if you use hell, then you can actually help people understand that they're in need of salvation. And so I picked up this big bookmark and I really dove into the material and I became this mini apologist. Apologist is simply a defender of the faith, an evangelist. And so I started to evangelize people in middle school because I was convinced like, oh my gosh, I what am I doing? People are going to go to hell and I need to tell them about Jesus. So what I would do is I would use their script. So their script would start with, you know, um, do you think you're a good person? And of course, most people would say, yeah, I'm a pretty good person. And this is where you hit them with these targeted questions, right? So you would ask, well, if you're a good person, have you ever told a lie? Of
Mm.
course, most people have told even a white lie. So like, okay, well, what do you call someone who tells a lie? A liar. Well, have you ever stolen anything? Even if something small, even you pirated something, you know, oh yeah, I have. Okay, but what do you call that person? Well, you call them a thief. And then you hit them with a third question, like, what Jesus said, if you ever looked at a woman with lust, well, then you've committed adultery in your heart. Have you ever looked at someone with lust? Well, by your admission, you're a lying, you're a thief, and you're an adulterer at heart, and you have to stand before a holy God. Of course, so you're trying to like actually scare them into, okay, but you're going to face judgment. God's not going to let you in to heaven. He's a just judge, blah, blah, blah. And I would go to a lot of my friends and acquaintances in middle school, and I would just try to strong arm them into praying the sinner's prayer, repenting, and believing in Jesus. I think I succeeded in a couple, or at least almost succeeded.
Mhm.
But this was me. I truly believed in all of this, and that I was saving people from from hell.
Mhm.
Now, fast forward to college. This was when I was having some doubts,
Mhm.
but because I was surrounded by Christianity, because I plugged myself into a campus ministry, and that's when, college is when you're kind of finding yourself, right? And you're making a new friend group and all of that. And I plugged myself in with Christians. I started to read the Bible really seriously. And I read the entire Bible in college. I started to listen to philosophy, started to take apologetics even more seriously, and became involved in my campus ministry. And I got back into evangelism. So, so I would do the same type of thing, approaching people on the campus. Excuse me, if you were to die today, would you go to heaven or hell? Right.
Mhm.
And so I was super gung ho. I was involved in the campus ministry. And even afterwards, after college, I became a part-time campus minister. Uh, all that to say was like I was very, very much on fire for Jesus and
Mhm.
that whole bit. But I would say it was after college, there were a lot of things that happened.
Mhm.
First off, the person I thought was, God's choice for me, soulmate, all of that, that ended up not happening. Despite people saying that, prophetic voices that I trusted, they said that basically they're like, oh, I see you guys in ministry over
Mhm.
around the world, and you guys are essentially like meant to be together. They didn't use those exact words, but
Mhm.
that didn't work out. Um, some of the businesses that I was trying to do definitely did not work out. So I was kind of caught in this weird place where I was in a lot of pain, and I was just kind of reevaluating some things, right? Because I was like, all right, I am a faithful servant of Christ, and I know the gospel. I know the gospel. I know the Bible better than most, and I've definitely served. And I wasn't expecting like a private jet or anything, but I was noticing some chronic patterns,
Mhm.
and that as far as I could remember, I wasn't living the victorious life. I wasn't. And that doesn't work very well when you're trying to sell Jesus.
Mhm.
Now, I was in a lot of pain, so it just kind of made me reflect. That's what pain does. Pain makes you just, ooh, okay, hmm, maybe something isn't right here. Maybe it is, but it causes you to reflect. And so it wasn't like I stopped believing or anything. I was still definitely believing. I was still, I still believed in all the fundamentals of the faith, right? The virgin birth, the Bible as the inspired and inerrant word of God, all of these things. But what I started to question was maybe some of the culture, right? Because I had like dove headfirst into church culture, which is so intermingled and tied with faith. So I started to question church culture, and I thought, well, like maybe there's wisdom outside of the church, right? Maybe. And I entertained that thought. So I started to look for wisdom outside of the church because I was in deep pain. And the things that they were telling me in church, they weren't quite working. So yeah, I went outside the church, and I found myself in a group of men that were into personal development. But this was from an entirely different worldview. So different, right? They were saying things like, um, you need to be grounded in your body. You need to feel your feet on the floor. And I'm thinking like, what? I've never heard this in my life, right? Or that they're telling me things like you can actually like let go of anxiety. You can actually ask yourself and let go. And again, this was all just totally brand new, right? In Christianity, you're not really taught. it depends on the branch, but like most Christianity, that you're not taught this type of thing. In
Mhm.
fact, you're taught to kind of almost like pray the devil away, right? In Pentecostal circles, or simply just to kind of almost like repress and um, just trust God, just read the Bible, just pray, right? Like, so this was a totally different worldview. And what ended up happening was this put a rock in my shoe, metaphorically, because I was in this group not as an apologist, not as an evangelist, not as a proselytizer trying to sell Jesus, that I had all the answers. For the first time in my life, I didn't. And so I was in the same group at as these guys who were in the same boat as me, and we were all suffering together. And it just kind of put a rock in my shoe. And from there, I really entertained like maybe there is wisdom outside of the church. Truly. Maybe there's something to this. And so long story short, I started to explore just some alternative perspectives. Again, not as an apologist, because back in the day, I would have been like, all right, let me just tear apart all of this perspective from a Christian standpoint, from an apologist standpoint, and this is all the reasons why it's wrong, right? I wasn't open, but now I was open. And once I started to open myself a little bit, start reading more perspectives, I started to question whether the Bible was truly the inerrant word of God and maybe had some things wrong. And this is where the walls of Jericho collapsed, so to speak, because as an evangelical, as a devoted Christian, if the Bible is even has a little bit of error, like if I can't trust the Bible, then everything else falls. And that's what ended up happening. So, uh, yeah, that's just a little bit about my story.
Wow, Justin. I appreciate you so much for your willingness to be vulnerable and walk us through that process. I know how deeply personal this is, so I really appreciate you sharing it. You know, um, that I can understand why that would raise some questions, but I still want to know how
Yeah.
you went from there to religious trauma. Like, what attracted you?
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Because this is actually something that people are, they might be unaware of. What I mean by that is when I was starting that deconstruction journey,
Mhm,
you're not aware of sometimes some of the wounds that are there, things that are more unconscious.
mhm,
And so it wasn't like all sunshine and rainbows when I was deconstructing, right?
mhm,
It was definitely, there was a lot of confusion.
mhm,
There was guilt to be worked through. There
mhm,
was a lot of fear.
mhm,
And then it would feel like I would take two steps forward and then two steps back, right? Um, yeah, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. So I think let me backtrack a little bit because I mentioned that, as I was reflecting upon my life, I just knew that like I wasn't living the victorious life. I think I fooled myself into thinking I was,
mhm,
right? So I could evangelize and I can put up a front and yes, I have the joy of the Lord and all this stuff. But I wasn't. And if I were actually truly honest and not in denial and not intellectualizing, rationalizing, and all these things, that I, for my entire life, was dealing with depression, with anxiety, with low self-worth and self-esteem, partly due to religion, absolutely.
mhm,
Um, but there are other factors as well, right? It's a multifaceted process.
mhm,
So my deep curiosity into who I was, and obviously challenging church culture, challenging some of these deeply held dogmas that I've always believed in, and understand once I started to experience repressed emotions coming out from this personal development, um, once I understood at an experiential level that I was holding myself back, it was my unconscious processes, my deep subconscious beliefs, wounds that I had not known that were there consciously, that I had repressed or suppressed both, but mainly repressed. Uh, Once I started to experience these things, and not only experience those things, but I'll experience the other side, right? I also got to experience a joy that I never thought I could, a love, a peace. And not to say like, oh, I experience this all the time. No, no, no. But like there were brief moments to where I was in meditation or I was in releasing to where some of these you could say lower vibrational energies transmuted into something higher. And that was like a revelation, an experience. And so understanding these things, and secondly, that I always had a pull towards helping people. I've kind of been more of an empath. Not to say that I'm empathic all the time, I'm not. But I have that kind of tendency. I remember like being a kid and hearing that people didn't have clean water, and I just felt, how could that be? Oh my gosh, like these people are poor. I have to help them somehow. And I always feel, I think as a personality, it's both a great personality trait, but also if you take it too far, then it could be a flaw as well, right? Like I just felt like the guilt on the of the world on my shoulders, right? Like, oh my gosh, everyone's suffering and I have to suffer. And that's also part of the religious programming too, right?
Yes,
Bearing a cross.
very much so. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I've always kind of had this inclination, this pull to helping people in some way because I saw myself in other people. And I think that's a lot of people. If you really stop and think about, you see yourself in others because we're all humans. And despite our differences, we're also quite similar. We're all going through the human experience. You can boil down human suffering to just a few fundamentals, right? So, um, yeah, I was always drawn to that and doing my own work. I really wanted to help people as well. And I knew that um, I started to discover, right, that some of these wounds were religious in nature. Some of this programming, if not a lot of it, was religious beliefs that were still there, even though consciously I knew maybe like, of course, hell is such a antiquated,
Mm-hmm.
silly idea and harmful idea. And I can consciously think that, except maybe my nervous system doesn't. It's still believing, oh no, there could be a hell. I mean, there could be the end times, and so yeah, it was a combination, a lot of different things, my own research, understanding that this field, there was even such a thing as religious trauma,
Mm-hmm.
and that this field has probably grown in popularity. There's been more research in the last 10, maybe 15 years, but it's still a new field. But just discovering that and understanding, oh my gosh, maybe I do, maybe I've experienced this, that can be very validating. That can be very validating.
Mm-hmm.
So I I love I love all these things that have to do with how we can change, how we can heal. Like this is my passion, right? So I discovered hypnosis, neuro-linguistic programming, Sedona method, mindfulness, all these different things, EFT tapping, and just just basic therapy. So I can go on, but
Yes.
I really developed a huge passion for that.
And Justin, thank you so much for sharing that. I was first deconstructing all these modalities that you're describing. I thought they were all evil because that's how I was
Hmm.
trained. That's how I was conditioned. It took me years of work and to let go that fear and explore. So I absolutely get it. And for the benefit of those who are listening and watching, can you describe a little bit what some of the symptoms may be for religious trauma? So how would someone know
That's
that
a
what
great
they're,
question.
yeah, how would they know that
Yeah.
what I'm feeling is religious trauma?
Yes. And let me first describe what trauma is. Because
That's,
a lot of people think that trauma is, having like a major car accident, which it is, right? That's traumatic. Or they think of something really like a really big event, Hurricane Katrina or earthquake, and absolutely that is absolutely traumatic and needs to be addressed. what I'm describing, I'm kind of broadening my definition of trauma because if you think about the original meaning of the word, it simply just means wound.
Mhm.
And so here in this context, I'm saying it is a wound of the soul. It is a psychic wound. And that could be that you had a major car accident and you're experiencing suffering dysfunction and things like that. Absolutely. But it also can be that maybe you had emotionally immature parents that weren't there for you in the way that you needed them to be, right? Maybe it's having an alcoholic parent. Maybe it's that you were bullied in school, or it could be a number of things. Now, I'm describing events. These are all traumatic events that happen, but trauma itself is the internalized wound. So it's not necessarily what happens to you, it's what happens within you. Because there are people out there who experience post-traumatic growth, right? So they experience a traumatic event, but they come out of that even better. They have more gratitude for life. They feel more connected to their spirituality or to other people. Now, that's a handful of people, but there are people who experience that. And you have two people, right? They might have very similar backgrounds, but one experiences growth and the other one doesn't, right? They experience a wound that's maybe has lasting effects. So the first thing to know is trauma is the thing that happens within you, and so therefore it's a little bit subjective.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, so it's a subjective, there's a subjective quality. It's also not rational.
Mhm.
I think a lot of times we try to logic through uh, our wounds, our trauma. And the more you do that, generally speaking, the more you do that, the worse that it gets. Because a trauma is emotional.
Mhm.
It's an emotional wound.
Mhm.
It's very hard to logic yourself out. We're not necessarily logical creatures.
Mhm. Mhm.
So, okay, religious trauma, simply defined, is a psychic wound that has any kind of relation to religious community, religious life, religious doctrines.
Mhm.
It's somehow, some way tied to religion.
Mhm.
Now, that can encompass a lot of different things. So, okay, so what are the symptoms? So, okay, here's the most obvious thing, right? If you're afraid of hell, if you're afraid of the rapture, if you're afraid of punishment, you're feeling very uneasy about all these things,
Mhm.
consider that you might have some trauma.
Mhm.
Could be. Now, what are some of the more subtle things, right? One thing that one thing we need to be aware of is it's not just what happens within the church;
Mhm.
it's coming out of it. So there's the wound that happens in the church, but when you exit it, you exit your community, you exit a sense of identity, a certainty about the world, a framework, all your meaning, purpose, a lot of different your social network, right? There can be a wound there that maybe you feel abandoned. Maybe the church members weren't so kind to you when you were deconstructing.
Mhm.
Maybe your pastor did or said something, right? And and it could be that your church was abusive, emotionally abusive or otherwise, right? So yeah, there's the fear of hell, but there's also the fear of maybe I'll never connect with somebody like I
Mhm.
did in church, right?
Yeah.
Maybe I'll never find my community. I feel abandoned, right? So um, maybe I don't feel like I can trust people. That could be equally traumatic.
Mhm.
There are other things, there are other subtle things, right? So looking at the world as if there's only good and bad people, and it's almost like this. It's like this type of splitting, right? Uh, those people over there, they're evil. These people over here are good.
Mhm.
That thing is evil. This thing that I'm participating is good, or vice versa, right? And seeing the world in this black and white and this almost a spiritual war of good and evil, which I think is a terrible metaphor. And that can definitely be religious programming. If you think that you're constantly 24/7 in a spiritual war, uh, yeah, life is going to be very difficult. You're gonna view the world in the lens of war.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. I don't think that's healthy. And that's going to create dis-ease in your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So, um, yeah, I'm trying to think of other like little subtle ways. I think also, I mean, guilt is a big thing, right? If you're constantly feeling guilty and you just don't know why, you just feel this like unease about the world, about secular music or like secular things. And there's just like this resistance or this ease. That could be religious trauma, right? And part of the work is also integrating into the world at large, like your non-religious
Mm-hmm.
community, right? Um, I had another thing. It'll come back to me.
Yeah.
But I hope I've described some people's experience here.
You've described all of mine.
Okay, okay.
Thank you. You were speaking to me, Justin. The only other thing that came to my mind while you were talking, why I was questioning myself, why was it so hard for me to see my wounds, is because of there's some amount of gaslighting that goes on because when you bring up these emotions, it's usually shut down saying that, oh, the devil's trying to keep you from your faith or the devil's trying to keep you from going to church. So sometimes we may not even recognize it as trauma.
Yes. Yes,
Mm.
exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah,
Oh,
because they're being framed in a way that makes suppression somehow okay. I mean, okay to them, but it's not okay.
okay.
Uh, yeah, it's crazy the amount of reframing, and not in a good way, a very negative reframing that
Mhm.
leads to more suffering, leads to questioning yourself. You're right, like that you're getting gaslit.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, your emotions aren't valid. It's the devil. Yeah, you got to pray the devil away, right?
Yeah.
Devil attacking you. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the truth of the matter is, our emotions are neither bad nor good. They're
Mhm.
just indicators.
Yeah.
They're just signs. And to ignore those signs creates more suffering. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Uh, yeah. And I would say that I think the number one thing that could be a symptom of religious trauma is that you don't trust yourself.
Mhm.
And you were talking about being
Abs-
gaslit by the authorities, right? Because everything about the way that religion is structured is there's this outside authority that knows best. I
Mhm.
have to always constantly submit to this outside authority, this outside God, this holy book. And I'm not saying that like obviously that people can can be helpful, right? Like
Mhm.
people we do need to rely on people to some degree.
Mhm.
But to give away all your power and constantly be told that you have to submit, right? Um, essentially, even if they're not saying that you can't trust yourself, although there's the verse that says, your heart is deceitfully wicked, who can know it? But even if they're not explicitly saying that, the
Mhm.
message that you're getting, your subconscious is
Mhm.
constantly getting the message, I can't trust myself. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm evil. I'm this lowly thing. I can't trust myself. I have to trust in this particular interpretation of God, right? The proverb says, what? Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean on your own
Mhm.
understanding. But the problem is, and there can be a wisdom there at some points, but the problem is it's their particular interpretation of what God is and a particular interpretation of who you are and your relation to that divine. And it's tied to their authority structure, the social structures, and the culture there.
Yeah.
Right.
And thank you so much for mentioning some of those Bible verses because I know for me they used to trigger me. They don't anymore because now I've learned the context, the culture. There's a healthy way to read the Bible. And
Mm-hmm.
those that are trying to, use it to guard doctrine or whatever, they tend not to look at it from the broader perspective. So thank you for bringing that up, Justin. And
Oh,
also, you make some really good points about, what religious trauma is, what the symptoms are. When someone, um, well, first, I think we have to be aware that that's what we are going through.
yes.
And, that's why I really wanted to bring you on and have this conversation. Because in my world, I do know people that are, beginning to question their beliefs, and they have some of these emotions, but it's still not where they recognize it as trauma necessarily. And
Mm.
and I think thank you for helping too. Like I know you work with people. You use some tools to help us move past that. You were going to say something. Please say it. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
I apologize. I missed a couple of sentences before
Uh,
what you were saying. I apologize. I
oh
missed
no.
something you were saying.
Oh, no, that's okay, Justin. I was just trying to say that, it's really good that we have this awareness now about religious trauma because
Mm.
for the longest time, people would be going through these emotions, these symptoms, and just beating themselves down for not having faith,
Got
right?
it.
Not
Yeah.
recognizing that
Yeah.
they are actually experiencing something very natural and normal. It's a normal response because it's not how things are supposed to be.
Yes.
And
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for saying that. Like
yeah,
all of these emotions, every emotion, even the ones that we label negative,
yeah,
that's what it means to be human.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
someone out there needs to hear this. It's okay to be human. It is completely okay.
Yeah,
Just take a breather, right? Our emotions are okay.
yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to ask you, after, you've been on this journey for a while.
Mhm.
So when it comes to faith, uh, where have you landed? What are your
Yeah.
beliefs today?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. Um, because my beliefs are, I would say they are evolving all the time.
Yeah.
And especially in the last, 5 to 10 years as I was deconstructing. I've gone through a phase of where I was more agnostic just for a few months. And I have to say, just for me personally, being agnostic was very depressing. That was just me. I understand. I have friends who are atheists, right? And they live fulfilling lives and they're great and I love them. Um, you have to find something that works for you.
Mhm.
So for me, being agnostic, it wasn't quite working.
Mhm.
Where have I landed now? It's a great question because I've actually been working just to be more vulnerable. I know I work with people who are going through this, but I myself am continually healing, continually growing, right? And continually uh, understanding my relationship to the divine. All that to say, I'm not trying to avoid the question. I would consider myself spiritual, but
Yes.
not religious.
Mhm.
That's just me personally.
Yeah.
I I've actually recently started praying again,
Yeah.
believe it or not. But I have this understanding that God is not just a person. I think that God can relate to us as a person, but the all in all, which is God, which is consciousness in
Mhm.
my opinion. So another word for God is consciousness, the awareness of all there is. And so God is not just a person. God is not just a force, but God can manifest as a person or as a force. God is transpersonal. That is beyond personhood. And I think this explains why some people in certain religions, right, particularly the Abrahamic religions, experience God as a person. And then some religions out there, I think like generally like Eastern religions,
Yeah.
it's more like a force. Or
Mhm.
sometimes, and I guess in Hinduism, I apologize,
Yeah.
there's also persons, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so And this might be a controversial, and I'm sure I've been very controversial what I just said. God is all there is.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, and that means that you and I have a divine spark, are a particular manifestation of God. And I know that if people are just getting out of Christianity, that feels like total blasphemy.
Yeah.
And it feels like arrogance and hubris. And I think we need to understand that when you, this body and this, I'm trying to use language that is not too jargony. So this body and this personality, uh, me identifying as Justin Tang. Justin Tang is technically is not God, but the awareness behind Justin is God.
Mhm.
And I know that's like super confusing, and I don't even know where I was going with that. Yeah, so the awareness behind whatever personality that you are is God. Now that doesn't mean the personality is not important.
Yeah.
Just because there's a spiritual world, something beyond the physical, it doesn't mean the physical isn't important. And on the contrary, the physical is very, very, very important. Taking care of our bodies in any way, like that is important. Taking care of our emotions, our mental health, right? Our relationships, our careers, it's all of this. It's God in you and all things playing out a I almost feel like there's a part of me that's like, oh man, like I want to be so controversial here. We're we're all in this together. We're it's God manifesting God,
Mhm.
playing. And I know that that can seem so, first of all, so dismissive to the suffering that's in the world. And
Mhm.
I don't mean that in any way. Like, I really believe my a big part of my purpose is to alleviate suffering. And I think it's possible,
Mhm.
right? And I think that's also part of the game of life. So yeah, I don't know if need any clarification on this. Part of me just felt like, oh no, like I just
Um, this it resonates with me. So if you're being controversial, then we're being
yeah.
controversial together.
Okay.
That really resonates with me, Justin. It's very
Yeah.
close to where I've landed as well. I
Yeah.
really do believe that this ginormous awareness, Richard Rohr, the Franciscan priest, I've read his books, and one of the things he says, God is beingness or being itself instead of
Hmm.
a being. It's the being
Interesting.
itself. So, yeah, I get it. And, all these divine sparks and all of us are manifesting in a very different way. And, when I was a Christian, I even had language for this. Like we used to call it the glory of God.
Hmm.
And to me, this is it. It's you, me, flowers, trees, everything,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
so definitely, thank you so much for sharing that. And before I let you go, because I can't believe how fast this time has gone, I
Yeah.
feel like I want to hold on to you a little bit longer. But before I let you go, if someone is experiencing this shift, or they are deconstructing and they are going through this emotional turmoil, do you have any words of advice for them? Or they may be struggling with the fear of hell or even
Hmm.
fear
Hmm.
of leaving the church, right? Because that's something I
Yeah.
suffered from because, oh no, don't leave because then the wrath of God is going to fall upon you, right?
Yes. Yeah.
What do you do? What do you say? And how do you help someone if you come across them and they share their pain and this issue?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. Great questions.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a multifaceted answer because if someone came to me, I would definitely explore exactly pinpointing exactly what's causing the
Mm,
problem, right? Um, a lot of, a lot of, and I don't mean to badmouth anyone or
mhm,
there's a lot of therapies out there that are kind of more service level,
mm,
or they deal with a lot of things with the mind, which you need to do. You need to examine beliefs and challenge them and really, uh, yeah, like really truly examine them. and that's good. That's definitely part of the therapy. But generally, there's usually something deeper. There's a root cause, and we even know this in like I know you're into more holistic health, right?
Mm.
And so a doctor might tell you do take this pill or do this or that, and sure, like things will it might help for a little bit, but a lot of times it's not even addressing the actual root cause. And so that's the work that I do is trying to find out what are the root causes to your suffering. Okay, so with that out of the way, let me give more like just a general advice, because the first thing is when you're deconstructing, and I think this is a lot of people's experience, you feel alone. You feel like there's nobody that understands you. I'm the only person out there. You know, I have turned my back on God and on my family and my church family and friend, like I am all alone. So the first thing to realize is take a breather. You're not alone. There's a lot of people that have deconstructed and are still deconstructing and will do that. And I think listening to a podcast like this can be very beneficial. So let's talk about the fear of being punished. Okay. That's very common. So, all right, because there's multiple ways I can go about this. The first thing is notice that you probably haven't experienced any kind of divine punishment yet,
Mm.
just by questioning. The sky hasn't fallen, the roof hasn't fallen yet. You know? So recognizing that, oh well, hold on, I'm questioning, but I haven't, an arrow hasn't gone through the window, right? Nothing like that. Probably. I'm sure there are exceptions, but generally speaking, if you're listening to this, the roof hasn't fallen on your head. And I think just having that cognitive insight will be like, okay, that's okay. So I haven't died yet. And then looking at other people, right, that have gone through the deconstruction process and hearing their stories. Number one, that's going to help you feel not alone, but also show you the fact that okay, they haven't died yet either. Like God's judgment hasn't come from them yet. Okay, so doing that, that will give you 2, 3 steps further, right? Now there are root causes, so there's some kind of belief there in your unconscious, or even maybe consciously, right? That God is going to punish me. So we can write that belief down, right? If we're aware of that belief, okay, God is going to punish me. And you might start to ask yourself, well, like, why do I believe that? How do I know this is true? And as you start to question that, it will get a little uncomfortable, but you have to keep going, right? So understand that the process is going to be uncomfortable. Understand that the process is going to uncover more fears, generally, guilt, shame, anger, resentment, grief, all of these things. They're going to come to the surface. That's actually what you want. This is good. That's good. That's what you want. And understanding that yes, it's going to be uncomfortable will help you move forward. Um, and the final thing is here, because I have 2 videos, right? One deals with how to reprogram your beliefs, how to kind of de-brainwash yourself, and I go through the process of connecting with these beliefs. So when you say something like, if God is going to punish me, when you say that, what do you feel? So the first thing is like connect with the first or second thing, right? As long as you're in this process, right? You say it, how does that feel in your body? Probably unease. Maybe some fear comes up, maybe some guilt. We want to start to become aware of these things. It's actually one of the very first steps is get aware. What feeling is this producing? And you want to connect with the feeling. That is there's no way to address the problem unless you uncover it. So we have to uncover. And by uncovering, I mean you have to activate these feelings. So once you activate the feelings, then you can start to almost like you're talking to your feelings as if they're another person. This is how the subconscious mind works. It's very not logical. It's very, to use a metaphor, it's very right-brained, right? More creative, more art. This is why when when you dream at night, it just makes no sense, right? It makes sense to your subconscious, but you wake up and you're like, what? I rode a dolphin into the desert, and what is happening, right? So um, just embrace the more of the emotional, feeling, metaphorical, imaginal side of things, right? Embrace that these things are not logical, right? So I hope I'm not confusing you here. Okay, so
Nope.
we've connected with the feeling, right? So let's just say there's guilt that comes up.
Mhm,
Oh, God's
mhm,
going to punish me, and it feels true.
mhm,
Then you're going to imagine that feeling. Maybe you can imagine it in front of you. It doesn't have to be in front of you. Maybe you just imagine it in your body. You connect with it. One of the questions that you can ask yourself is, where do I feel that in my body?
mhm,
And get really clear. So once you're clear, maybe you're personifying it in front of you or personifying it within your body. Talk to it as if it was another person, as if
mhm,
it were your child.
mhm,
Because when you relate to your feelings as children, they're going to respond to you so much better. It's like this. It's like if you told your children that I don't like you, I don't want to be with you. I hope I'm going to put you in this closet so I don't have to deal with you. I mean, what do you think is going to happen to that relationship if you ask them, okay, I want you to do this, this, and this, right, by force?
mhm,
That's not going to produce very good results. Well, think of your emotions as children. And if you're constantly trying to repress, suppress, avoid, resist, they're not going to want to talk to you. They're not going to want to unveil what's really truly going on.
mhm, mhm,
Yeah. But if you build that relationship, you start to get curious. Oh, I wonder what this guilt is trying to say to me. I wonder what's underneath the guilt. I'm
mhm,
feeling this fear. I wonder where that's coming from. And
mhm,
you approach this through the energy of curiosity, which is a very high vibrational energy, curiosity,
mhm,
presence. So you connect to them with presence and curiosity, and you try to get to know, hmm, I wonder why I have this belief. I wonder why you're feeling this way. And then you can start to challenge that belief,
mhm,
and it will connect to you on a subconscious level if you're connected to the feeling.
mhm.
I'm hoping I'm making sense because I
Yes.
kind of would just took a lot of stuff and I just like poured it out.
No,
Is there any clarification?
no, Justin, this is perfect. I really, really appreciate it because those that are tuning in, if they've experienced religious trauma, I appreciate you giving them some tangible things that they could do, you know. We're not just talking, right? I appreciate you bringing that value into this conversation.
Yeah. Do you mind if I do something? What, would you mind if I demonstrated something very small with you?
Absolutely
Would
not.
that be
I would
okay?
love that. Yes.
Yeah. So like the principles of change are going to be the same. Now I
Mhm,
think with religious trauma, um, it depends on the person and on the nature of the trauma.
mhm,
Sometimes you're going to need multiple sessions, right? And
mhm,
ongoing for
mhm,
sure, especially if you've been deconstructing.
mhm,
Both of our journeys, it's taken a process, right? Um, and there are other things within deconstruction religious trauma that could be helpful, like reading these different books. Like Richard Rohr is great, right? The Bible for Normal People is a great
mhm,
podcast. There's other resources out there that I think can be very helpful. But let me just demonstrate something like super small. It doesn't have to be religious in nature. Um, is there anything that you are resisting being, doing, or having?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and you don't have to tell me.
Mm-hmm.
And don't have this be like something major, right? Something small, right? Something. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
great. You can have your eyes open, eyes closed. It doesn't matter. And so I'm hoping people who are watching or listening can follow along, or they can replay this and kind of do this for themselves, right? So there's something you're resisting doing, being, or having. Um, where do you find that in your body when you think
Yeah.
about that?
In my belly.
in your belly. Okay. So
Mhm.
connect with that feeling in your belly and just notice and just become aware of all the thoughts, sensations, images, sounds, anything associated with this feeling in the belly. And I want you to use your imagination. If this feeling in the belly were some kind of color, what color might it be?
Brown or gray?
Brown or gray? Yeah, brown or gray. Now, what color do you want it to be?
Pink or blue?
Pink or blue? Okay. So now you don't have to force it, but just allow and imagine that the brown and the gray could start to turn into a pink. Or you said a blue, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So imagine that it's beginning to open up and dissolve or just beginning to change and transmute into this pink and blue. It's wonderful pink and blue. And notice what happens when you do that.
Mhm.
What are you feeling right now?
So before I was feeling like there was a rock in my belly,
Yeah.
and now it just feels lighter.
Feels lighter.
Mhm.
Yeah, awesome. Perfect. Now that was so simple, right? Like most people can do this.
Yeah.
And that was just quick. That was like what, 10 seconds, 15 seconds? Now it could take longer where we're doing something on something very small,
Mhm.
which on purpose, right?
Mhm. Yes.
But this is how the subconscious mind works. So you don't always have to go to the level of belief. Sometimes you do, but I want to give people like a very quick technique or process. Essentially, if you can connect with the feeling or the sensation or the
Mhm.
uneasiness, whatever it is, and you can turn it into some kind of metaphor. In this case, it's a color. And
Mhm.
you mentioned a rock. If I were doing a session, we would dig more into it, but I'm
Yeah.
just showing you a very
Yeah.
easy, simple
Mhm.
process, right? But if you can turn it into a color, and then you can turn it into the color that you want, the color that represents success, joy, confidence, bliss, whatever it is, peace, right? And you start to imagine that it's turning into that, all of a sudden, boom, you're communicating with your subconscious mind and things start to shift.
Mhm.
So I want to give people like a quick win. Now, is this going to resolve all your issues? Maybe, maybe not. It really depends on what it is, but like try it out, test it.
I really, really appreciate this, Justin, because I know how powerful the nervous system is. And that's where so much of the trauma is sitting. Thank
Awesome.
you. And that brings me to my very last but very important question. How can people find you if they would want to work with you to work through their traumas? I
Yeah.
know you have that YouTube channel and a Facebook page,
Um, the best way is probably through YouTube and Facebook.
and I'll have that,
Yeah,
have those links so people can find you and they can
absolutely.
reach out to you. Yeah,
Awesome. Awesome.
absolutely. Justin, this was extremely value packed. I really, really appreciate you. Thank you so much for taking your
Hey,
time to do this.
well, thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you.